Hello, this is Angelica Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Blessed Samhain friends, we are in the thick of the thinning veil right now. I talked about it at the beginning of October, how, this is a time that many cultures celebrate and honor death and grief and connect with past over loved ones, ancestors, spirits, spiritual guides, angels. It is a time when we can connect. It's a divination time. It is a beautiful time of connection. And ancestors come in many forms, the ones that are from our ancestral line that have achieved some kind of wisdom. So a lot of people kind of wonder like, well, I don't know anything about my ancestors. You can allow the ancestors to just come through, and they're the ones that have guided us through lifetimes, and they have been part of our soul family at some point, or they're teaching us something about what we have to know. Oh, by the way, it's Angelica Yingst. I forgot to introduce myself. This is a time anyway that we celebrate Halloween and Samhain and Dia de los Muertos and the Day of the Dead. We actually call it All Souls Day as Catholics, or All Saints Day. They're 2 days. Let's talk about it all, okay? Um, so let me get over to my Samhain. Here we go. So Samhain is pronounced Samhain. Samhain. It means summer's end in Gaelic. And a lot of people are asked, like, well, why do you celebrate Samhain? Well, I actually just celebrate this time. Samhain is a really great way because it comes from the Celtic Wheel of the Year, which many pagans have adopted as a way to follow the energy of the year. And I certainly do. I teach this to my students. I think it's really important to know because a lot of times people are asking me, like, why can I really connect, like, in the winter, but then summer comes and I feel like totally disconnected from my spiritual practice. I'm not sitting in meditation, I'm not dreaming, blah, 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 blah. It's because, like, that's not the time of year to do that work. And once we understand this wheel of the year, we can stop, like, or our connection to the earth, I should say, because the wheel of the year is really the agrarian calendar. And that's the important part. And that's why I think it's important because when you're an agrarian means, an agricultural society, one based on farming. Once you kind of get into the rhythm of farming, you understand what's supposed to happen at all times of the year. You don't plant seeds in the fall. And that's same with your energetic work. Things are harvested in the fall, they're planted in the spring. That's because that's how the earth moves. So can you plant things in the fall? Yeah, but they're not going to come up really until they're ready, until the earth is ready. So once we start doing energetic, spiritual, magical workings, we really want to connect with the energy of the earth. It helps you, become part of the rhythm of nature if you feel disconnected. Our houses, our jobs, especially if you go to a job where you don't have windows, you don't have, you have controlled air all day. I mean, they basically have to at this time. So these harvest festivals are important because each one did a different thing. So we celebrated the first harvest at Lammas, that's August 1st. The second, or Lunazda. The second one is autumn equinox, or Mabon. That's when we're harvesting like the root vegetables, the fruit, all of those things, like the apples and things like that. Now, the Samhain is the third and final harvest festival and marks the beginning of the dark season. Okay. And so some people consider Yule New Year's, other people consider Samhain New Year's. It really just depends on your point of view. What's really interesting, I just have to tell you this, that it is like 5 in the morning. I'm alone. I have two monitors as I'm doing this, and a little ladybug just landed on one of my monitors. And it is pretty darn cold here in Pennsylvania, and the ladybug is my symbol for my daughter. And I'm just telling you this because this is how the ancestors talk to us during this time. And she's my predeceased ancestor, but like it just, oh my gosh, I could cry. Like it's just so sweet when, she makes herself known. And so you have to figure out like what are your symbols that your ancestors are bringing forth. And now she's just sitting there, just letting me see her and experience her, which is so, so sweet. So, okay, Samhain is that last festival. So, whether you consider it the last day of the year, this is the start of winter in the witches' year because Yule is midwinter. Um, so many consider this a new year, and Samhain falls like between October 31st and November 1st. And this was a time when we acknowledged, if you lived in an agrarian society, that the food is done, right? So the fields were cleared before Samhain because the lore warns that food harvested after Samhain will spoil. And so anything left in the fields are left for night spirits, fairies, wandering dead. And that is a big theme all across cultures about feeding the dead and helping them move on, right? To become the ancestors. Because the souls that die that haven't done their work are hungry, hungry, hungry. You get it? They're hungry for spiritual knowledge. They're hungry for wisdom, and they haven't quite gotten it in this life. But in agrarian society, the community is preparing for a long winter. So they're drying medicinal and magical herbs, they're canning and preserving fruits and vegetables, and root vegetables that are harvested are stored in cellars for a long winter. So you're really taking stock. This is the time you really, really know, okay, this is what I got to last for the winter. I mean, we are so disconnected from that idea, but it was a big deal. What are you going to have that lasts you through the winter and feed your animals? And how does everyone's harvest compare? And how do you help the whole community? So traditionally, this is also a time when farmers butchered their animals for winter, drying and storing the meat to survive the long winter. And I think that's part of the reason that we honor the dead at this time because there is death around. So the meat was salted and kept, and the bones were thrown into the fire sometimes for the gods and as a security for good fortune. Some people think that bonfire is like bone plus fire equals bonfire. Like that's because the bones were thrown in, and often they were red. They were pulled out the next day, and there would be seers that could interpret what the bones and the ashes and the darkness on the bones, what that all meant. Because, all the fat burns off. And even in Greek, ancient Greek religion, the fat was offered because it burned, you know, it was offered to the gods and the goddesses because that was considered the really important part, which is funny because we are always cutting fat off of things, but it is juicy and delicious. And they felt like that was the kind of offering they needed to give to the gods. So the horn god, if you're looking at the pagan interpretation of this time, is an aged and mature stag, and he gives his life again. Remember, the Lu gives his life as the grain in Lammas. He is the one that dies is when they harvest the wheat. Now he is the, he was the grain god then, but now he's the horn god. So he's the stag. So he's giving his life again so that people can survive the winter. So the god is mourned over three festivals, first as the grain god, then as the vegetable god, basically the harvest god, and then the horned god. Because remember, Mabon is kidnapped at autumn equinox. So the goddess, and she was, the mother, she's grieving. Okay. That's really, really important. That are the goddesses and the gods, they grieved, they had human attributes that were important. You know, Demeter is fully grieving her daughter Persephone. The Sumerian goddess Inanna is in the underworld. So the goddess grieves and at this time transforms into the old crone. And a crone in pagan, like when I call myself a crone, sometimes people cringe because they're like, ugh. It's like because I'm going through menopause. Like when we go through menopause, we get activated into our croneness. Okay. So, like when we think of the triple goddess, the maiden, the mother, the crone, they're all wise. There isn't one that's better than the other necessarily, but the crone is the one of wisdom. She's of the north. Okay. And that's important. We can't, we demonize old people in this society, but old elders were not demonized in other cultures and time periods. They were honored and revered and cared for. And that's what's really important during um, this time, that we honor our wisdom. Now, other cultures celebrate the dead. And, I think one of the things that is a little confusing is like, well, Angie, Angelica, your culture celebrates the dead, and I honor the dead through the Dia de los Muertos, all which is something that is generally associated with Mexican culture, and that's because they do have big celebrations, and those celebrations often came, sorry, from the Aztec and Maya, but they spread all they were in all the tribes basically through Central America. I mean that there is a connection through from Incan all the way up to Aztec. There's similarities. And if you look at like my native DNA, it has Incan, it has Mayan, it goes like I have different regions of indigenous blood within me. And that's because they weren't just staying within their tribe. They cross pollinated, so to speak. But my ancestral uh, native indigenous blood comes from El Salvador, where I'm not even, my mother's not from there because her father emigrated from El Salvador to Panama. So we celebrate Dia de los Muertos in Panama, but it's a little different. You know, there are celebrations, there are processions to the graveyards, there are eating food at the graves of our dead. So, this is a feast of the dead. This is a holy day, but it's also a celebration of life. It's not this like we must grieve and be sad and blah blah blah. I mean, if you look at my altar for Dia de los Muertos, it's all bright colors. It's happy, it's joyous, it's loud, That's because I want to celebrate the wisdom that my ancestors have brought forth. So, when we talk about the thinning veil here, what we're talking about is being able to access our own grief, access the joy and wisdom they also bring forth, and how they still live through us and live through our life, our celebrations, our successes, our growth. Another, time, this time also is a time of fairies, and it's kind of like the shadow time of Beltane, which is like on the other side of the wheel of the year. That's another big celebration. It's one of the greater Shabbats on the wheel of the year. So we're doing a lot of the same things, just in the opposite way. In Beltane, we're honoring bringing in life. In Samhain, we're honoring death, the leaving of life. And another thing that happens is like all those babies that are born around Beltane. This is a time when farmers made the decision, because they're slaughtering their animals, which would stay, and they would feed through the winter with precious grain that they themselves would sometimes eat. So it was a big decision and commitment to decide which animals stay and which go. And as a mirror, the cattle are led back into the barn. You know, they're the ones that go in now. So there's celebration, there's revelry at Samhain, there's staying up all night and making big bonfires and reading the bones and divining. Scrying is a big deal during this time. Divination is extremely important. So this is a time to do tarot readings and tea leaf readings and ruins and look at your astrological forecast and all of those things. There's also silent dinners, covens now, or mediums will hold silent dinners where everyone's invited to a dinner. There is a chair put there where it's like the chair for your ancestor, and it's given food and all that stuff, and everybody stays silent the whole dinner. And what they're doing is just noticing which ancestors come through. So basically, they're doing readings for everyone, including themselves, who's sitting at the chair, who's being honored. And after the dinner, everybody shares their messages from the dead. So, sometimes you can work with owl here. Owl is a traditional symbol of shadow and the dead. In some tribes, owl is a symbol of death itself. I know a few shamanic friends who see owl before they lose someone. But owl is a symbol also of clairvoyance and magic, and it's because owl travels in the night silently. So it goes into the land of the dead. At Samhain, you are asked to connect with your ancestors and your relationship with your ancestral line. So Samhain's a magical time, and it's an important time. Now, I just wrote a newsletter about this, about Dia de los Muertos and my altar and my own personal relationship with it. Um, and one of the things that I think is really important is the question that I get a lot. My ancestors are awful people. What do I do? you know, like I come from a long line of colonizers, or I come from a long line of, um, racists, or whatever it is, and we all do. I do. I certainly do. But what can you say when you say your ancestors were awful people? You can say, thank you for letting me be the breaker of awfulness, or, I will not spread that any longer. You acknowledge it. You don't get mad that some people have great ancestors and you have shitty ones. I mean, I've got ancestors that are human, and so do you. That means some of them were awful people, and some of them broke their lines. I have a lot of really strong women in my line. Like my mother is one of 12, but she had 9 girls in her family. 9. And so when we look at her line, we really have always looked at the women line, the matriarchal line, because I come from a long line of strong women who don't really put up with too much shit. So I, have female alcoholics in my line. I have, my great grandmother was, a character. She cussed like a sailor. She drank and smoked and had affairs and denied her own children sometimes. She had children out of wedlock. It's like having when all of a sudden a wife shows up with kids. That happened to my grandmother. Someone showed up with their daughter. So my great grandmother, sorry, not my grandmother. But that's the important part. We understand that our ancestors are nuanced, just like we are. And so they have things to learn and things to not do, right? That's the important part. So, you can say, thank you for letting me break the cycle of abuse, trauma, pain, addiction. You get to be the breaker of that. And many of us who are drawn to this path are. We're the black sheep, you know? So we can reframe our ancestors, put them in their historical, traumatic, or family context and find wisdom, even if it's learning from their sins. But sometimes the deep grief of lives not lived or their actions that were harmful can move through us. We can say, I see that story. I acknowledge why you did that and why you believe that. In my family, we are Sheridans on my father's side. Philip Sheridan was an Indian soldier. Like he killed Indians. That is like a really ugly part of my lineage. I am, 15% Native American. I am half Panamanian. So, like, my ancestors would hate me. And when we think about that, then we think of, like, how do we make peace with that? It's hard. Obviously, like, I feel more drawn to my Panamanian side, but, that's also a part of me. And this is the healing that we do. This is the dialogue we have. We have to reframe, we have to understand, we have to humanize, and we have to integrate. We break the patterns, we forgive, and we allow their wounds to be our wisdom now. So we transmute all of that. We transform. Okay. So we get to decide, how we want to do this. We could hate that part of ourselves, deny it, ignore it, and then it becomes a shadow, you know, and that comes out in really effed up ways with other people. So, I think part of it is we honor our ancestors. We acknowledge the wisdom they gave us in life. We honor the wisdom they give us in death. So I did a reading for us, the Samhain ancestor spread that's in my book, but I rewrote it because that's a very personal reading as well. It's really for you, and I think if you are a tarot reader and you're really drawn to doing this would be a great spread to do to connect with a specific ancestor. One thing that has occurred to me over the years, which I haven't talked about a lot, is that you can really do mediumship through tarot. And some people think that's weird, but like it's worked for me in my personal readings, in my client readings, you know, you can do this. So this one really helps guide you to kind of connect with one ancestor and see the wisdom they're ready to bring forward. So in this one, I just rewrote it. So instead of the first position being what ancestor do you want to connect with, this is, I changed it to the card to describe the journey from Samhain to winter solstice. Like, what does that time look like? And the next one is, the what your ancestors want us, what our ancestors want us to know right now for those of us who are doing this reading and all of that stuff. Um I will tell you what each position is, so no worries. Okay. First position is the card to describe this dark time between Samhain and winter solstice, and we're getting the Wheel of Fortune reversed. So the Wheel of Fortune is a card of like really good timing, and everything's kind of flowing and delicious, and it's just like this is time to put your money on whatever. So when we get the Wheel of Fortune reversed, we're looking at the fact that this isn't great time to make like big changes. This is a time when we can feel really chaotic, like things are all up in the air and the whole wheel is spinning. So, um, what we really need to do is acknowledge that there's change all around us and it's in every aspect of our life. So when we think about what's ending and what's coming in, it's basically like we have to be in that feeling right now rather than think about like, oh, I have to, like, this is a really good time to make a change. It's more of a great time to grieve what's being changed. Okay. In your next position, it's what your ancestors want you to know, and the Hierophant comes up reversed. Now the Hierophant is the Pope, so he's all about rules and institutions and doing things by the book and learning. And so when you get him reversed, I mean, he's really the card of the bohemian. He's the card of someone doing it differently. So, when we think about what is this next time period coming up and looking like, and we see lots of change, it's going to feel chaotic, it's going to feel a little crazy, blah, 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 blah. You know, what our ancestors want us to know is not to then go into being more rule oriented, but kind of coming at it from a non traditional point of view, like celebrating when things change. Being, in that Hierophant place means to be acknowledging that the Hierophant reverse, that we get to be our own Pope. We get to make our own rules, our own, not really, I don't want to like encourage everyone to form a cult or something like that, but you form your own religion in a lot of ways. I'm going to pull a little Earthbound Oracle card. Your guides and your ancestors are saying to keep it simple. Simplicity is key here in what our ancestors want us to know. We don't have to get really ritualistic and have everything be in order and have rules around everything. We have to keep it simple and do what feels right to us. Okay. Now, the ancestral gifts we can call upon during this time. In that position, the third position, the grief card comes up, the 5 of Cups. So, it's basically like we have to feel the feelings. We have to let go. We have to cry. We have to tantrum. We have to do all the things we do when we're grieving. And, a lot of times I think what's hard is we go into this place where, like, well, if someone doesn't die, I can't grieve. And that's just not true. Sometimes we take jobs thinking they're going to be the answer to our lifelong quest, and what they are simply um, a stepping stone. And so sometimes we have to grieve that. We have to grieve the fact that we thought it was something it isn't. Our relationships, our friendships, our jobs, our work, you know? So that's part of like what we can call upon during this time. How did your people let go? How did your ancestors grieve? And that can we have this gift of like honoring the grief at this time, you know? I think of grief as, my friend Helen told me this one time because I was really deep in grief after my father died. I think it was then. And she said to me, you're healing. Like if you were healing a broken leg, what would you do? You would walk slowly. You would nap a lot. You would take some baths and honor yourself and eat very gently. You would not make commitments. you know, these are important things to remember. Our soul, our heartbreak is just as important as our leg breaks, you know? So that's part of the medicine here. Now, what do you need to know about your spiritual journey at this time? The 5 of Swords comes up in the position 4. Now, the 5 of Swords is the card of the guy holding five, basically he's holding 3 swords, 2 are on the ground, and 2 guys are walking away, and he's like a smug ass going, and this is like the card of nobody's gonna win this situation. So, what do you need to know about your spiritual journey right now? Your spiritual journey are going to come through the people that annoy the hell out of you. That you're never going to win the situation. You're never going to win the argument. You got to look at like who pisses you off. Who says the thing, like who triggers you. And sometimes like triggers can be like traumatic triggers, right? Like they remind us of a traumatic event. But a lot of times triggers are like someone says something and it's just like, what an arrogant ass. I got to show that guy that he's wrong. Arrogant asses are always going to be arrogant asses. They're going to be arrogant asses whether you tell them they are or not. They're not going to change because you say you're an arrogant ass. They just are. That's their nature. So, like, what do you gain out of having a confrontation with somebody like that? Nothing. You have to walk away. And so this is what like our spiritual journey looks like, which is probably why this is going to be a sort of challenging time, because when our spiritual lessons come through annoyances and watching our reaction to people and how, so and so is an arrogant ass, that's hard. I can tell you that's been happening to me. And, it's not people that are important to me at all, but people that like think they know it all, people that belittle me or talk down to me. That triggers me, like mostly with strangers, not even with my people. Like that doesn't happen with the people I love. I put people in my life that are good. So it's all the randos, you know, the person that's like helping you and acting like you're stupid. And you're just like, what the hell, dude? I did nothing to you. Like it takes nothing to be kind. So we're watching our reactions to other people, you know, that's important. Okay, so in our next position, the what no longer serves us, the Hermit comes up reversed. So you can see like there's 3 majors, but there's actually 4 majors that are all reversed. So here, what no longer serves us, the Hermit reversed is basically saying what's not serving you is isolation. Even if you say like you have some fancy spiritual reason why you're isolating, It's not true. It's like a excuse for isolating yourself. It is time to connect with people that are on your soul level. You may not see them all the time, but it's important that you connect with them. I have a friend that we call each other, a couple, like maybe once a month or something. And we got to talk like 3 times this week, and it was such a joy. Oh my goodness. It was like such a soul filler. And like like at least 2 times we talked, it was like over an hour. And like that just feels like we're having coffee. She lives on the other side of the country, so I'm not able to do that with her. But having that connection is important. A friend of mine also like texted me and said, "Call me when you have a minute." I said, "Dude, I always have a minute and I never have a minute. Just call me if you want to talk." Because I can't, when you tell me find a minute, like I just, I keep busy. So just call me. And that's kind of the energy of right now. Is like it's not time to isolate your wisdom and to be isolated with your wisdom. It's time to connect with your wisdom and other people. Okay, so guidance on how to release the Queen of Wands comes in. I love her when she's your guidance because we get to embody her. Think of your Leo woman who's like, I am in charge. This is my life. You're just living in it. This is the energy it's time to embody right now. And I'm freaking living for it because if we each do that, that'll be really fun, actually. So, how you're releasing is by saying, I'm the important one. I need to get my needs met. I am not putting suffering any fools, as that Five of Swords is saying. I am honoring who I am. I'm standing tall. I'm creative. I'm the one creating my reality. And I'm going to let go of anything that's not important. It's dead to me, you know? So it's, it's funny. I have like a screensaver of like pictures and memes and stuff that I think are funny. And I have this like picture of this woman, like kind of in Renaissance era, like walking with a corpse behind her, and it's just says, "Excuse me, that's my emotional support corpse." And I think of that too. It's like I'm just owning the fact that this is the stuff I'm going to let go of. Like this is the dead stuff. And she walks like very. I may put that somewhere so you guys can see it. This is very funny. But okay, in the what new energy will serve us best now in this time frame? Death comes up reversed. So it's like we can't let that fear of change be the thing that keeps us making choices. We have to make choices with death, out of it's just like, okay, that's just going to be part of it. I'm carrying my emotional support corpse. I have to like know that this thing is dead and, we're going to let it go at some point. So, the new energy is to like not fear change, not fear things dying, not fear things changing. And that's much easier said than done, but we're just kind of letting go. And, one thing that I do that may be helpful, may not be helpful is just like when you kind of bring mindfulness, and I know mindfulness is like a buzzword, but basically you have to think of the opposite of that, mindlessness, right? Mindlessness means that you're not consciously directing what's happening in your mind, right? So it's like you're eating before you have decided whether or not you need to eat. You haven't examined that. Examining things is mindfulness. So, like, one of the things that, like, let's just use eating as that's a great example because a lot of people do mindless eating. Like, they're sitting in front of the computer writing and they have something that they're just snacking on. They're not thinking about like, oh, I've just eaten, a whole bowl of nuts. Okay, I'm talking from personal experience. Okay. But like that's like what 200 calories in a quarter cup, when you eat a whole bowl of it. It's like that mindless eating. You're not hungry, you're just keeping busy. So when we bring a level of mindfulness to things. It doesn't mean we don't eat the nuts. It doesn't mean that we even edit how many nuts we eat, but we sit and say, oh, I'm eating nuts. Do I want the nuts? Like, what is happening in my body that I'm craving these nuts? Oh, I just need something to keep my body occupied while my brain is working. Okay, that's an ADHD thing, right? But like mindfulness doesn't mean you necessarily change everything that you're doing. It just means you're bringing thought to it. So it's thoughtfulness. So mindfulness, when we talk about letting go of things, means that when something arises, an old resentment, an old whatever, we bring mindfulness to it. Angie, how is this story serving you right at this moment? It's not, okay, you can think about that later. Let's bring our uh, thoughts back to what we're doing. So we're just noticing what's arising and then reframing or recentering into the thing we actually want our attention to be on. So when we talk about like what is the new energy will serve us best, and we get like the death reversed, it means every time we start getting afraid of change, we have to bring mindfulness to it. What are you actually afraid of? What actually is happening here? I'm afraid that if I quit my job, I'll never ever find another job, that I'll be alone, that this is the best thing I could get. Never mind if you're being, exploited or used or whatever. Many of us are just afraid of letting people down. Good Lord. So our outlook, what's coming up for this next 3-month period until winter solstice, the Three of Swords is coming in. So we're really looking at, our heartbreak. So I don't think this is going to be an easy time by any means, but I do think it's going to be an important time. Now, I would go back and listen to Mars retrograde stuff that I guess I didn't talk about it with everybody, but Mars is in retrograde and it's going to stay in retrograde till January. And that is going to be challenging. Let me share some info about that. So Mars has been in Gemini. I gotta like sort this out. Okay, let me tell you why this reading feels this way. Okay, so Mars, who is a planet of like war and passion and decisive action, it moved into Gemini in August. So August 20th, it did that. And for whatever reason, which I don't quite know, Mars is usually in a sign for like 1 to 2 months, but because it also falls in a retrograde, it's going to be in Gemini until March 25th, 2023. So that's a long time in Gemini. And Gemini can sometimes be challenging in that it's an air sign and it has this kind of dual relationship of showing us things. It's centered in the mind, but it shows us two sides of ourselves and all that. Now, Mars is in retrograde October 30th, and it goes till January 12th. So, one of the things about Mars going retrograde in Gemini, it just basically is saying, like, no matter how, solid you are, how intentional you are, expect things to be a little challenging. So, like, your intentions are taking much longer to manifest. They don't come the way you think they are. So sometimes it looks like you're taking a lot of steps backwards. But, it just is part of this questioning whether our path is aligned with who we are, with our higher self, what we really need. So we're figuring it out. Now, another thing is that we're right in the middle of eclipse season right now. So the first eclipse was in Scorpio, and that was October 25th on the new moon. And then we're going to have a lunar eclipse in Taurus. This is a time where like things might appear out of nowhere, new energy. This is time to like put focus on what your goals are. And then we're taking like that those healing steps rather than fast furious night energy steps. We're taking gentle supportive steps to kind of bring that energy and ground it in. So, we're kind of in the middle of things because the last eclipse in Scorpio was in May. So we're kind of still in the middle of that. We're going to see another eclipse in May in Scorpio because it's going to be a full moon. So just to like kind of remind you, lunar eclipses happen at the full moon and solar eclipses happen at the new moon. So we're kind of seeing that energy like mirrored. So when you are in the sun sign of Scorpio, for example, you are going to have um, lunations on the full moon, eclipses in Taurus, because that's exactly opposite. You guys knew that though, right? I don't want to like always say stuff that you guys know. This is also going on really long. I'm so sorry. I'm so wordy. Geesh. Someone needs to stop me. Um, so we're kind of moving through it and you can see it. So our outcome here again is the Three of Swords. So we're looking at like what's really hitting us in the heart and what we can kind of do to get through it, you know. So just don't be surprised if it's very internal time that people are annoying the crap out of you, that you feel like things aren't moving forward. It's not supposed to. So that is your Samhain reading. And I thought I would pull one of Juliet Diaz's Samhain cards as like a last harumph. And we've got seduction. So, this is a time also to um, like use all of our gifts, all of our gifts. Queen of Wands is great for that. You know that she's very seductive. She's your sexual queen. She's the one who's like gets hot and heavy with everyone. That's no offense to any of my fire sign people, but um, we love how she uses her sexuality. And, I just happen to be someone who thinks that's totally awesome. We all need a hoe period. So when we get seduction, we're reminded that, we are sexual beings as well. And that, seducing is an act of like entrancing, right? Mary Beth Bonfiglio has an awesome blog post called, I think it's like How to Fall in Love with Yourself or, something like that. How to Seduce Yourself, maybe. And it's like all like these amazing body rituals to just like honor your body. And this seduction card reminds me of that. Like, that's the kind of work to do, you know, to seduce yourself, to fall in love with yourself and what you bring to the table. I'm going to link that in the show notes. I am going to try to put that meme in the show notes if I can, or like link to it on my blog or something, because I think it's funny. And I'm going to wish you a blessed Samhain. On a side note, tomorrow, which is 10:31 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I am doing a Samhain crystal grid healing. I'm using a one-to-many model for distance healing. I'm activating everyone to a grid to honor the ancestors, and we are going to take a guided shamanic journey to the land of the ancestors. And we're going to use Al's going to guide us, but it's going to be interesting what comes up. And it's funny because I keep thinking we're working with Al, and then Vulture started coming in, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's Vulture. So we'll just see what happens when we get there. So if you want to join me, just check it out on my website, angieyingst.com. All of my events and classes are there. Um, and new stuff is coming. I'm like retooling my membership group, and I think it'll be a better option for more people. I am going to be offering my full moon, new moon readings for the whole group instead of just people who subscribe to that. And so the Facebook group is where you want to be if you're interested in hearing my readings at the full moon and new moon and my tarot and my earth medicine reading of the month you guys all get. But The Facebook group, I'm going to be doing like weekly tarot and coffee polls. I mean, not coffee and tarot polls for everyone, and just having discussions, answering questions and stuff like that, which is my favorite thing to do. So thanks for listening, and blessed Samhain.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie at themoonandstone.com.